The last episode certainly did set the comment section a-chattering, which comes as no particular surprise. I'll come on to that a little bit later, but first we shall focus on action. The action of which I speak is to make sure the late, great Alansøn, our inflatable tender, who I can only assume had his welded toe rings ripped off at sea, is replaced. We need a tender for safety. So that's my first job at Hartlepool Marina, and I have a delivery. I'm off to fetch, perhaps only temporarily, Alansøn's replacement, which has arrived at the lock office. And there are actually these trolleys to help us move things around, but I lack a pound coin. You need a pound coin for them, so I'm going to get some free physical exercise, which is no problem whatsoever, of course. It's a roughly 25 kilo boat, plus all the accessories, which means I've not gone down the road of a hyper lightweight tender. That's a conscious choice. I do want it to survive, and often it's things like towing loops that are compromised to save weight. Don't know whether I'm sad or excited about this. Still kind of miss Alansøn. I thought now, on a non-windy day in Hartlepool, might be the right time to have a quick chat about the last episode, what happened, some of the comments, and this, that and the other, and just to clarify a couple of things. I think the first thing to talk about is Alansøn. There was a lot of really good advice I got from some commenters before, and indeed, of course, after the fact that Alansøn ended up being lost at sea. Alansøn shouldn't have been lost. As a polar traveller, one of the key things that you make sure you don't do is lose stuff, and that normally means tying stuff on, not just once or twice, sometimes 3 times, because generally if you lose something, that's it, and that could be life-threatening. So yeah, there would be a case for someone to excise that part of the video, but that's not the game that I'm playing here. I'm sharing what's actually happening here. So yes, I was disappointed about the loss of Alansøn, and I've read the comments both lamenting the loss and also blaming me for the loss. I gather I'll get 2 million views on this platform if I exclude all the context from this video and just title it an unboxing event, but I have a little bit more respect for Alan's army than that, so I haven't. We'll achieve YouTube domination the honourable way. The unboxing revealed that there was an inflatable boat inside, which was a good start. Along with that was a carry case, a cover, a pump, oars, and some little extras, plus lots of pointless plastic wrapping. Whilst you see me working out which end is which, and doing a 1/3 inflation of the 3 chambers, 1 bow end and 2 side chambers, I've chosen a Talamex Highline 230. It's one of the few boats that still uses heat welding and not glue, and uses a special German PVC, not Hypalon, which is a now lesser used premium synthetic rubber. I considered a Zodiac, but apparently unless you go for their UK-made defence or rescue services range, their consumer ones have plummeted in quality recently. You can get an aluminium floor, or my choice, the air floor. This means the boat can roll up and stow relatively easily. This air floor, and it's reassuringly tough to handle, fits in across the full inside of the boat, and on top of the currently deflated air keel, which helps boat control at speed, apparently. You slot it in at the back, and there's a fiberglass brace towards the bow. Since water can flow off the air deck and underneath, and then to the stern to the self-bailer, people do say that this means the part of the boat your feet and belongings will be in tends to stay fairly dry, or at least not swamped. I went from a floppy half-fill to a proper inflation, although since it's not a sunny day, I'm going to avoid going anywhere near full, especially since not all of the chambers have overpressure relief valves. I tried to work out how the seat slots on, and had a read in the unlikely event an instruction manual contains anything of instructive use, and then ended up distracted by the oars. I still have Alansøn's oars, so now I have these as well. 2 sets of oars. 4 in total. I'll give you a slightly more detailed tour of the inside of my new Highline, for those of you who don't routinely study small boat specifications as a form of hobby. Here's the transom, integral to the boat and not added on later, which is typical these days and unlike the donut design of Alansøn, who is, an Avon Redstart. You access the valve for the inflatable keel tube through this hole in the floor, and all the valves have a similar protected screw cap design. This is the only overpressure valve, and I presume it only works for the tube it's located on. Perhaps this is so even if all the others burst through an overpressurized boat left in the hot sun, this one survives in a sort of inflatable life tube as a safety feature, even if no longer a functional boat. The telescopic foldable oars are well made, and I do like the design which keeps the oars captured and unlikely to fall out, but I do take the point that others make when they say that they prefer open oar locks, so you can more rapidly remove, place and replace oars as and when you need. If this system breaks and you want to swap out a pair of random oars, well, you can't. This is not me developing a transom fixation, but it does act as a glorious backdrop for the rigid seat, the sun cover, and the rather empty little repair pot, which actually doesn't contain any glue, as they want to save cash. They actually want you to not end up with a wrong or expired glue, they say. This is the inflation process, which is really straightforward. The valves inspire confidence, although I can't vouch for them yet at low temperatures. As far as I can tell, the pump sends air on both the up and the downstroke, so that speeds things up. The only thing I found on a couple of the valves is that the way that the pump hoses clip on is either at the 0 or 180 degree angle. Given that the hose is quite stiff, if the angles conspire against you, the stiffness of the hose can rotate the clip in its housing and pop it off whilst you're trying to pump air in. This is a handle. There are plenty of grab and carry handles, which again are fewer on the Hyperlite inflatables, and here's a video clip of the transom from the other side, just to make sure it's still there and give you the sort of tap you do when assessing things. This is what it looks like from above at the stern, and you can see where the floor is fixed in and where unwanted water can pool and then exit. This looks complete and rather excellent, but I've tricked you. That seat is just plonked on the top there and would fall off at the merest suggestion. This is because, the instruction manual tells me, it only goes on when the boat is half inflated, so back out with the pump, and I did that. The new inflatable is complete, and I'm going to give you a full walk around in case any of you are in the market for an inflatable, and this may help you get a sense of the design and layout. Bow at the front on this occasion, stern at the back, all that sort of thing. I also had a close look at the two side-mounted towing rings and the excellently robust looking one at the bow, where multiple lines can be routed and attached. As far as I can tell, there's only this one tiny dink caused during transit and delivery, and we can forgive that. The general workmanship and welds look great, and there's no adhesive leakage you often see on cheaper glued boats as the panels overlap. There's no point storing this new tender atop Alan, or bestride, or on the pontoon and tripping everyone up, so onto the water straight away. I released a little bit of air first and put the sun cover on, then just a matter of walking Alan's new companion around to the correct end and tying off securely. When in marinas and it's windy, obviously I keep the lines nice and short so that the tender doesn't swing around and get in people's way as they try and park. And now as I pan majestically up and across historic maritime Hartlepool, I'll come on to my thoughts about the comments section. At the end, there's some rather good news to finish us off for this episode. I do read all the comments and I do take a lot of things into action. I can't go back through all the comments and every time I action a plan or an idea that I'm advised on, go back and sort of confirm that I've done that. I simply don't have the hours in the day. So rest assured that I do read every single comment. I really do. And if there's no reply to your comment, it doesn't mean that it's been ignored. It may well be that it's been asked or suggested a few times. So just sort of check back maybe through some of the more liked or the more read comments in order to see whether you might be on the same page as someone else. And sometimes comments don't make any sense to me at all. Sometimes I'll query them, sometimes I'll just let them slide. I need to have a sort of a priority system when it comes to commenting, but I promise I do read them all, and I do comment and reply when I think that there's something useful to be said or when someone asks a sensible question. I do not delete any messages, even the really negative ones. Some of them I find very entertaining, so I leave them up for my entertainment and for yours too. But if you are going to leave a comment and it's not particularly well thought through, or you're just trying to feel big and special and clever, don't be surprised if I bite back. Sometimes I might bite back hard, so just be prepared for that. What you put online, and that goes for me and for you, we get held responsible for. So, with the last episode, I'm now in a situation where I'm in sort of the wrong bit of the coastline, and I'm now slightly running out of August. The weather is going to get better next week, but I'm now scrambling because it's now sort of summertime and holiday time. My struggle is actually with getting crew available, right time, right place. I really am trying to do my best to get that going because I'm desperate to get the boat up to northern Scotland by the end of the summer before my main speaking season starts, and then my ability to do these sorts of trips will be much less, and then we can get into the true winter season when I can do solid chunks of time up there working on Alan, and then we can do the Norwegian part of the trip up north next year, which I know wasn't the original plan, but it's what we're doing now. And here is that good news. I told you a while ago that for some maddening reason, and despite testing before installing it on the mast, the horn wasn't working. A couple of people got cross about the momentary button, or perhaps the horn was just Alan! And failed. No, in fact. I'd been sold a voltage regulator with the wrong label on. It was producing 5 and not 12 volts. I swapped it out, and well... Having put the cover back on the horn and light control panel, I checked again, and well... Also, I need a name for this new inflatable boat. Of course I have a few ideas, but put yours in the comment section please. Along with general abuse, passive-aggressive projections, and of course, pleasantries and good cheer. Another one soon I hope, and these rubbish weather systems are hopefully behind us for the time being. Bye.